great, loved it, appreciated it. Then there's that one person, right, that says, that wasn't that good, or I didn't learn anything. So it's a 40-to-1 ratio, and what's stuck in my mind? That one person. And we get stuck in that too. We have to get past that. People will criticize you along the way. That's how people are. I remember I grew up in California. I went to visit my parents for Christmas. I went with my wife and my 3-year-old daughter. She was between 3 and 4. We got to John Wayne Airport, and it was crowded. It was after the holidays, and the flight was oversold, so I didn't think we were going to make it. And then we were about to give up, and then the podium, they says, Mr. Mortensen, please come to the podium. So we come to the podium, like, oh, great. They said, would you mind if we upgraded your whole family to first class? Now, that's pretty easy. I don't think you have to really think about that one. I said, sure. Well, they're go ahead and board, and go ahead and take your things and board. And so we boarded. My wife sat near at the window. My daughter sat in this big seat, little 3-year-old girl in this big seat. They gave her cookies and soda, and she was in heaven, and I sat across. The apartments were full, and so I put my luggage behind that little magic curtain, I guess they have, and put it there. Didn't think much of it. And sat down, and it amazed me as people walked in, the resentment in their face to see this little girl in this huge seat. Have you seen people do this? And I was just amazed. I'm thinking, anybody could have bought that seat. It's not reserved for anyone special. But people would rather resent you for your success than rather actually going out and paying the price to get it. And it really amazed me. That really shocked me as we landed. I had to get my bag over in coach. I said, excuse me, and the man was just really upset, and I could tell he was angry, and I grabbed my bag, and I kind of looked at him and says, you're not first class, you're no class. Wow. Why do people say these things? They will. They will criticize you, and that's okay. You just have to get past it and get past those fears. And this will happen with many of you. This is what's really going to happen. It says, I've been naked all day, but you're the first to notice. Try changing the part in your hair or some other things. People aren't going to notice. Do your thing. Focus on what you do. Follow your heart. And that's what makes the biggest difference. Second major obstacle is frustration. Many of you might be frustrated right now. Maybe you're not as far along in your business or your occupation or your finances as you want to be. And you have to understand the frustration, because frustration many times just causes us to turn off. Now here's the thing you want to write down about frustration. Frustration comes from an unmet expectation. So the person you're talking to, you're frustrated, you're tense inside, there's an expectation that has not been met. And it's important that you understand frustration, because a lot of people turn frustrated, they turn off, it doesn't matter anymore, I don't care, and they don't pursue it. It's one of those things that really sucks the energy out of you. And number 3 is failure. Winning is all about losing, isn't it? You look at those Olympic athletes that won the gold medal. Have they lost more times than they've won? You look at Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, we can go down the whole list, Abraham Lincoln. They've lost more times than they've won. As long as you learn from it and grow from it, and it doesn't scare you to put yourself out there and do it. Failure will happen. That's part of the learning experience. You just can't let it hold you back. Winning is all about losing, going out there and doing it. And that's a critical thing. And you have to understand about willpower and failure that you can't let it get you down. You have to understand how willpower and commitment works. In fact, let's talk about commitment. Have you ever had a day when you didn't feel like doing the things you know you needed to do? Raise your hands. A few truthful hands out there. Every day, probably. Maybe this morning when the alarm clock, how do we stay focused? How do we stay committed? You've been great for 3-4 weeks, and all of a sudden you fall off the horse. How do you get that commitment? How do you find that willpower? So I went back to study the researches on willpower. How do we stay focused? And it's interesting what we found. They found that willpower is actually like a muscle. You have to strengthen it. But on the flip side, if you've been using your willpower all day, the muscle all day, at the end of the day, it's pretty weak, isn't it? Think about it. If you're dieting, do you fail in the morning or in the evening? It's because your willpower has been drained. What's drained your willpower? And you have to be aware of what's happening. I don't care anymore, and you open up the fridge and you enjoy yourself. And so here's an interesting study that they found out when they figured, well, how can you stay on top of your willpower? How can you charge that battery of your willpower? They took these students from the university, and they came in and said, look, you're doing a test on sensory perception. You'll be eating some food, so you can't eat for 4 hours. So these